All right, welcome to the deep dive where we kind of take your massive reading list
Yeah.
and boil it down to the essential insights, to help you become well-informed but quickly.
Yeah.
Today, we are going headfirst into some textbook excerpts on the fundamentals of marketing.
Right.
And this is all for you, the learner. You're the one that wants the knowledge that sticks, those
Yeah.
light bulb moments, a clear picture without like total information overload. And I
Yeah.
think we can definitely deliver on that.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to really build a rock-solid understanding of marketing at its core.
Okay.
What it means, the key concepts that drive it, and then how it works in our modern world.
Right.
These excerpts really do cover a lot, from the very basic definition of what is marketing,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to understanding why people buy things and how companies develop those strategies.
Yeah.
So let's dive in.
It's interesting right off the bat. The textbook draws a really clear distinction between marketing and selling. And I think a lot of people think they're the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but they're really not.
Yeah.
Selling is really focused on the needs of the seller,
Okay.
moving product, making a profit.
Right.
And marketing is fundamentally all about understanding and meeting the needs of the buyer.
Oh.
So it's that buyer-first mentality that underpins kind of how marketing operates today.
Okay, that's a really important distinction to make. It's
Yep.
not just about, like pushing something on someone. It's about understanding what they actually want. And it's amazing, how many different things can be marketed.
Right.
I mean, the excerpts point out it's not just tangible goods, it's services, of course,
Mhm.
but it's also events like even the Olympics or experiences going to a theme park, even people like with celebrity endorsements,
Yeah.
places, properties, organizations, information, even like abstract ideas.
Yeah,
So it really touches almost every facet of our lives.
absolutely. And, it's not just these, big corporations with these fancy ad campaigns.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, they're major players.
Sure.
But the textbook also highlights that, individuals
Right.
and all sorts of organizations, are engaged in these marketing activities.
Oh, okay.
So think about, a museum trying to attract more visitors
Yeah.
or a charity promoting donations.
Right.
They're both utilizing these principles of marketing.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we talk about figuring out what those buyer needs are.
Right.
The excerpts introduce some like really fundamental marketing concepts like
Yeah.
needs, wants, and demands.
Yeah.
And it's key to understand that marketers can influence our wants,
Mhm.
like, that new smartphone,
Yeah.
that craving,
Yeah.
but they don't create the underlying need to actually communicate with people or connect.
Right. They don't create that need for communication or connection,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they can certainly shape it into,
Right. That desire for the newest gadget.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you have the purchasing power to back it up,
Right.
those wants become demands.
Mm-hmm.
The textbook then goes on to outline, this whole interconnected set of elements, like figuring out your target market.
Hi.
Who are you trying to reach?
Right.
How you position the product in their minds.
Okay.
And market segmentation,
Okay.
which is dividing up the market into smaller, more focused groups.
Mm.
And then, of course, there's the offerings themselves,
Yeah.
which encompasses your brand,
Okay.
the value proposition,
Right.
how satisfied your customers are.
That'll make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So it sounds like almost like a puzzle where all those pieces have to fit together.
Mm.
You've got also marketing channels,
Yeah,
How does the product get from you to the customer?
right.
Then the whole supply chain that makes that actually happen.
Yeah,
And then you can't forget about like the competition out there in the whole marketing environment.
right. All those external factors that can either help or hinder your marketing efforts.
It's a very complex web.
Okay, so that gives us that basic framework.
Mm-hmm.
But the world of marketing, it's constantly changing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
The excerpts mention these new marketing realities of the 21st century.
Yeah.
What are some of the big shifts that are shaping how marketing is actually done now?
The textbook excerpts here don't really delve into the specifics of like the societal forces at play,
Okay,
but you can recognize their powerful influence.
right.
I mean, think about the speed of technological change.
Yeah.
how the world's become increasingly interconnected through globalization,
Right.
how consumer values and priorities are shifting.
Mm.
Things like a greater focus on sustainability or
Yeah.
authenticity.
Okay.
These really create both new challenges and really exciting opportunities for marketers.
I can imagine, yeah. So then on the business side of things, what new tools or capabilities do companies have now that are really fundamentally changing how they approach marketing?
The excerpts point to a few key advancements.
Okay.
The sheer power of computing now
Yeah.
allows for really sophisticated analysis of just massive amounts of data.
Right.
And then the internet and mobile communication have created entirely new ways to connect with customers,
Right.
offering unprecedented reach and interactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole digital landscape allows for this
Gotcha.
level of personalization and
Yeah.
customization in marketing messages and product offerings that just it wasn't possible before.
Right.
So it's about being more targeted and relevant than ever before.
Yeah. It's almost like marketing can be like hyper-personalized now.
Right. Absolutely.
But the textbook makes this really crucial point
Yeah.
that marketing isn't just the responsibility of the marketing department anymore.
Right.
It's a much broader function
Mhm.
within the company.
Precisely.
Mm.
And it emphasizes that for marketing to be truly effective in today's environment,
Okay.
it needs to be ingrained in the entire organization.
Right.
It has to drive the company's overall vision,
Okay.
its vision, its strategic planning.
Right.
You need buy-in from everyone,
Yeah.
in engineering to finance to customer service,
Okay.
all working towards these same customer-centric goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking table 1.1, which is mentioned in the text here, probably illustrates this.
Right.
How these seemingly disparate departments like engineering and finance and purchasing, production, and accounting all kind of contribute to creating and delivering value for the customer.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if the product itself isn't well engineered or, the operations team can't fulfill the promises that you're making,
Right.
I mean, even the most brilliant marketing campaign will ultimately fail.
Exactly.
So it really highlights that, creating customer satisfaction is like a company-wide endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
The excerpts even give us some compelling real-world examples of companies that have really taken this to heart.
Yeah.
Like Stonyfield Farm and Ben and Jerry's.
Yes. So Stonyfield Farm, they really integrated these values like environmental sustainability and health consciousness right into their core marketing and business operations.
Right.
They weren't just selling yogurt. They were talking about, global warming and GMOs on their packaging and offering healthier product options.
Yeah.
And what's really insightful is that these values didn't hinder their financial success at all.
Wow.
In fact, they became the #3 yogurt brand in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Showing that, purpose and profit can coexist.
Yeah, that's a really powerful example of how, doing good can also be a really successful business strategy.
Right.
And then you have Ben and Jerry's with their very well-known triple bottom line.
Exactly. Ben and Jerry's, they have this philosophy that goes beyond just, financial profits.
Okay.
They explicitly track and report on their environmental and social impact alongside their financial performance.
So these companies really demonstrate that, a strong marketing orientation can be deeply intertwined with a company's core values and contribute to both societal well-being and financial success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've kind of laid the groundwork, defined marketing, looked at the evolving landscape.
Right.
And now it's clear that understanding your market and your customers is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
The excerpts talk about gaining marketing insights, and it starts with the broad economic environment.
Right.
So how does that factor into the equation?
Well, the economic environment has a really direct and significant impact on consumers' ability and willingness to spend money.
Right.
The textbook uses the 2008-2009 recession as a stark example.
Okay.
During that period, there was this big debate about whether the dramatic shifts in consumer spending habits were just temporary reactions to the crisis, or if it represented a more fundamental, long-term change in their economic outlook and priorities.
Yeah.
And this uncertainty really underscored the critical need for marketers to closely monitor and understand these broad economic trends to anticipate those changes in consumer behavior.
It really makes you think about how economic shocks can have lasting psychological effects on consumers.
Right.
So beyond those big picture economic forces, the excerpts also delve into the psychology of the consumer.
Yeah.
What are the key psychological processes that influence how we make those buying decisions?
So the textbook highlights 4 main psychological processes that are kind of constantly at play.
Okay.
Motivation.
Okay.
What are those underlying needs and drives that kind of push us towards certain products or services? Perception.
Right.
How do we select, organize, and interpret all this information? We're constantly bombarded with learning how do our past experiences and our acquired knowledge shape our future behavior and then memory.
Right.
How do we retain and retrieve information about brands and products? These are the fundamental building blocks for understanding why consumers choose what they do.
Yeah, it's like our brains are constantly filtering information, making these connections, and marketers are trying to understand and influence those processes. And then there's the actual step-by-step process that we go through when we make a purchase. So what are those typical stages in the buyer decision process?
The textbook outlines this kind of standard 5-stage model.
Okay.
So first, there's problem recognition.
Right.
Realizing you have a need or want that needs to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Second is information search.
Okay.
Actively looking for potential solutions or products. Third is evaluation of alternatives.
Okay.
So you're comparing the different options you found.
Okay.
Fourth is the actual purchase decision. Choosing a specific product and making that transaction.
Okay.
And then finally, there's this post-purchase behavior.
Right.
How you feel about the purchase after you've used it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, can significantly impact future buying decisions.
Makes sense.
And it's important to remember that in many purchase situations, there isn't just one person involved.
Yeah, of course.
You might have initiators, influencers, deciders, the actual buyer, and then the end user, all playing these different roles.
It's rarely like a solitary decision, is it?
Right.
I'm just thinking for a family vacation, the kids might initiate the idea, but the parents are the ones researching, deciding, and ultimately paying for it.
Right, exactly.
So understanding those different roles, it's crucial for targeting those marketing efforts effectively. So once you have some understanding of your potential customers, how do marketers actually identify who they should be focusing on? That's where this concept of market segmentation comes into play, right?
Absolutely. Market segmentation is this strategic process of dividing a large, diverse consumer or business market into these smaller, more homogeneous subgroups based on some shared characteristics. And the textbook mentions several key variables that marketers use. I'm thinking they're probably referencing Table 8.1. But these typically include geographic segmentation, which is dividing the market by location, demographic segmentation, using factors like age, income, education, psychographic segmentation, which focuses on lifestyle, values, and personality traits, and then behavioral segmentation, looking at things like usage patterns, brand loyalty, and responsiveness to marketing efforts.
Yeah, so you could tailor your marketing messages to people living in a specific climate with a product that's designed, for those conditions. Or you could focus on a particular age group, with language and imagery that really resonates with them. The excerpts also highlight this growing importance of understanding and targeting multicultural markets.
Yes, and this is increasingly critical. The textbook specifically points to the 3 largest multicultural markets in the U.S. Hispanic Americans, African Americans, and Asian Americans. And it emphasizes, their significant and growing buying power, but also highlights that, these are not monolithic groups. They encompass this wide array of diverse subsegments with really unique cultural nuances and preferences. For example, even within the Hispanic American market, there are numerous nationalities, each with its own distinct traditions and tastes.
Sure.
The example of Goya Foods,
you
know, offering 1,600 products,
wow,
including 38 different varieties of beans,
oh,
really underscores this need to cater to these diverse tastes and preferences within these broader multicultural markets.
Yeah, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach, is it?
No, not at all.
You really need to understand, those specific needs and preferences within these large and diverse groups. The excerpts also mention State Farm's targeted musical sponsorships and how the California Milk Processor Board
had to adapt their famous Got Milk campaign for the Hispanic market, further illustrating that importance of cultural sensitivity in marketing.
Absolutely. And then moving beyond those, those broad demographic and cultural categories, the textbook also touches on these user and usage related variables that can be incredibly effective for segmentation. These include occasions, when a consumer might have a specific need, like travel for a holiday, triggering a need for luggage, user status, are they a first-time buyer, a former user, or a regular customer, usage rate, how frequently do they use the product, buyer readiness stage, are they completely unaware of your product, are they actively researching it or ready to make a purchase, and then loyalty status, are they fiercely loyal to your brand, or easily swayed by competitors. Okay, so all these different ways to kind of break down the market. I mean, they allow for much more precise and effective targeting of those marketing efforts. And it seems like that ultimate level of this tailored approach is individual marketing, or what the textbook refers to as customerization. What's the essence of that concept?
So customerization, as conceptualized by Wyndon Rangaswamy, takes this idea of mass customization and personalized marketing to a new level. It's about empowering the individual consumer to design and tailor the product or service offering to their exact specifications.
Oh, wow.
So the company provides the platforms and tools, but the consumer is taking on this much more active role in shaping that final product.
Wow.
Think about, designing your own sneakers online. Or creating a personalized blend of coffee.
Okay, so the customer essentially becomes a co-creator of the product.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a pretty significant shift.
It is.
From the traditional model, where the company dictates what's offered. Okay, so we've segmented the market, identified our targets. Now, how do we actually make our offering stand out from the competition? And that's where the critical role of branding comes in.
Absolutely. Branding, as the textbook clearly defines it, is all about imbuing products and services with the power of a brand. It's about creating these meaningful differences in the minds of consumers, and effectively communicating, who your product is, and crucially, why they should care. It's about building this set of mental associations that help consumers organize their knowledge about different options and ultimately make their choices.
It's definitely more than just a catchy name or a memorable logo, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's about the entire perception that consumers hold about a product, a service, or even a whole company. And that leads us to the concept of brand equity.
Exactly. Brand equity represents that added value that's associated with a brand name. Based on the positive perceptions, preferences, and behaviors that consumers have towards it as a result of its marketing activities. And as the textbook points out, stronger brands typically translate directly into greater revenue. I'm thinking Table 9.1, which they mention here, probably summarizes those key benefits of high brand equity, which can include things like increased customer loyalty, a greater willingness to pay a premium price, and more effective marketing campaigns. There's even research suggesting that a 10% increase in brand equity can potentially lead to a 5% increase in customer lifetime value. So it really shows the power of perception turned into profit.
Yeah, so investing in building a strong brand has very real and tangible financial benefits. the excerpts also introduce this brand asset valuator model.
Right.
So what is that framework designed to help us understand?
The brand asset valuator model, probably visualized in Figure 9.1, provides a really useful framework for assessing the overall health and future potential of a brand. And it looks at a brand through 4 key dimensions. Energized differentiation. So how distinctive and innovative the brand is perceived to be. Relevance. How appropriate and meaningful the brand is to a broad set of consumers. Esteem. How well regarded and respected the brand is. Knowledge. How familiar and understood the brand is. And from these 4 dimensions, the model derives these 2 key indicators. Brand strength. Which is a leading indicator that combines
differentiation and relevance. And suggests the brand's future growth potential. And then brand stature. Which is a more current indicator that combines esteem and knowledge. And reflects the brand's current power in the market. So you can think of energized differentiation as what makes the brand zippy and different. Like Tesla's innovative technology. Relevance is how much it fits into your life. A family car versus a sports car. Esteem is about respect and liking. Like how people feel about Patagonia's quality. And then knowledge is simply how aware you are of the brand. So high differentiation and relevance suggest that future growth. That's brand strength.
So that's a really helpful way to kind of visualize it. It's like, taking the pulse of your brand, and when you're initially creating a brand, or refreshing an existing one.
I mean, the specific elements that you choose, the name, the logo, the slogan, they're incredibly important, aren't they?
Oh, they're absolutely critical. The textbook outlines 6 key criteria to consider when selecting these brand elements for actively building the brand. You want elements that are memorable, easily recalled and recognized, meaningful, conveying those desired associations, and likable, aesthetically pleasing and engaging. Now, for defensive purposes, to leverage and protect your brand equity, you need elements that are transferable, across different product categories and geographic regions, adaptable over time as the brand evolves, and then legally protectable, to prevent infringement. And the examples of Snackwell's, whose name immediately suggests healthier snacking, and Panasonic Toughbook, conveying durability, illustrate how a well-chosen name can just instantly communicate these key brand attributes.
So a carefully chosen brand name can really do a lot of the initial work, setting those right expectations for the consumer. But how do companies actually gauge how their brand is performing in the real world, in the minds of their target audience?
So the excerpts emphasize the importance of conducting regular brand audits and implementing these ongoing brand tracking studies. So a brand audit is essentially, a deep dive, a comprehensive examination of the current health of your brand, and it's from the customer's perspective. It aims to uncover those existing sources of brand equity, what's driving its value, and identify any areas for potential improvement or leveraging. Now, brand tracking, on the other hand, involves continuously monitoring key brand metrics over time. Things like brand awareness, brand image, customer attitudes, to see how these factors are changing and whether your brand building efforts are having that desired effect.
So these 2 approaches together, I mean, they provide marketers with a really comprehensive understanding of their brand's performance and trajectory.
It's
like, taking that detailed snapshot of your brand and then tracking its movement and changes over time to see if those strategies are actually working. So finally, the excerpts touch on these different corporate branding strategies that companies employ. So what are some of the common approaches?
The textbook mentions a few prevalent strategies,